Afternoon, rather. I'm Emily Afterzandi, Managing Director of Atlantic Live, and welcome to our Food for Thought session, What We're Eating. We're here today to eat lunch and talk about lunch. Bon Appetit magazine recently named Washington as its 2016 Restaurant City of the Year. And for those of us foodies in the new room, not myself, there's a lot to be excited about. But the food culture here is more than just a fancy menu. Healthy and sustainable eating has been a cornerstone of Washington's eateries for decades. Now, we've seen top chefs make their home and their names here, and more people are experiencing bold culinary creations made with local ingredients delivered fresh to your table at Ripple or to your own home. So today, we'll talk about what's on the menu and the issues facing our food culture, from food waste to sustainable farming. I'd like to thank our underwriter, the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, for making today's event possible. And on their behalf, I'd like to welcome Mike Haddad, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Schreiber Foods. Mike, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon to you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and on behalf of the entire dairy community, thank you for having us. So, I want to connect just a few dots with many of you are probably saying, who is this Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy? So let me just do this for a minute. I promise it's not a commercial. So my full-time job is I'm the CEO of a dairy company headquartered in Green Bay. We're a 100% employee-owned company. We're one of the largest dairy companies in the world. Our revenues are in excess of $5 million a year. You've been eating our food for years. We're one of the largest yogurt producers in the world, natural cheese, cream cheese, processed cheese. We make products for most of the leading retailers, food service companies, and some of the great brands in the world. Okay? But I'm here today acting in my capacity as Vice Chair of the Innovation Center for Dairy. And so, why are we here today, and why are we interested in this? So let me try and explain that. 8 years ago, the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy was formed. It was formed by those who really had a stake in the dairy industry. So it's largely made up of dairy farmers and dairy processors like Schreiber Foods. Why did we come together? Truly, without being idealistic, but it's the God's honest truth, we are so interdependent on each other for our existence. So Schreiber takes milk, transforms it to yogurt, but we're nothing without milk. And those dairy farmers who make milk need the Schreibers of the world to transform it into great products. And then guess what? We need retailers and restaurants to be able to sell it because they own the last 2 feet. They ultimately sell the food to consumers. So we said we need each other. So we came together and said we got to work on our long-term relevance and do it responsibly. It was real serious because we knew there were some things that we needed to get a vision on and a long-range plan to be viable. And a bit about my background, I grew up in the consumer space, so my background is in finance, supply chain. I called on retailers and food service companies for years. So I live in the world where the consumer's king. And whether we like it or not, whether they're misinformed, we can be frustrated, we can do all we want. Consumers who are nuanced and you can't homogenize, own it. They're the boss. So I always feel like no matter what, we have to be relevant and adapt to consumers. And we said, well, if the dairy industry and the dairy community is going to be viable, we really have to come together on the things that you're going to hear in this discussion today. Food safety, animal care, health and wellness, the globalization of food, biotechnology and information technology and the role that it plays. Because these are all really important topics. And let's face it, it's not a trend. People are talking about this. And it's not going to change. It's not going to change. So just a quick story, because I want you to know how even in my life, this is right and sort of in my face every day. So I'm married 29 years. We have 2 kids. I have a son serving in the Air Force and our daughter who's 28, married, and giving us 2 beautiful grandkids. Okay. So our daughter and her husband will not, she's 28, her name is Kelly, will not go to restaurants or buy things on the grocery aisle today that they grew up eating. And so of course we have conversations, and I say, well, Kelly, FDA says that food is gross. It's generally regarded as safe. And there's challenge studies and there's decades of research. And trust your dad. This stuff is safe. This is what I do for a living. Great, Dad, I believe you, but I'm not giving it to your grandbabies. Okay? And that's just reality. She's not going to. And so I get reminded about how hard it is to earn consumer trust. And that in order to be relevant, we have to earn it today and with all consumers in the future. And yes, what are the answers? They're easy to talk about, but very hard to achieve. We know it's education. We know it's science, but at the core of it, it's really an authentic transparency. So you think about a company like Schreiber. We're a B2B company. You don't know us. You can Google Schreiber Foods. You can find out about us. But we're one of the largest dairy companies in the world, and we're a big part of the food supply chain. Many of you don't know that you've been eating our products for years. So when you discover Schreiber, when you discover dairy farmers, and anywhere else in the food chain, you've got to know that we are being responsible and that we care about our food and that it is safe and we're being good stewards of the earth. And we know that this is all key to our relevance. If I have to vent for just 1 second about what is frustrating, and then you got to get over it, is that we all want to make informed decisions in anything in our life. And where we get wobbly in the dairy community and in other food spaces is, are people making decisions, and they really fully informed? Now, it's utopian to think that everybody's going to know everything about food, but we have an interesting dichotomy going on because, in the United States today, less than 2% of the workforce is in agriculture. 100 years ago, it was almost 40%. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be in agriculture to understand food, because we have all the information we want in our lives right at our fingertips, right? If we want to, we can learn anything. But it really is an obligation, and I really believe this. It's an obligation, not only of our government, but of our great dairy farmers, processors, retailers, and restaurants, to get really clear and be transparent about what's in that food. And I mean this. This is how we make our living in the dairy community. This is how we provide for our families. It's our retirement nest eggs. Great dairy farmers who take on risk every day to make that food, and for us to transform that milk into yogurt or cheese. And so with all that said, we are really, really honored to be part of this conversation. And why are we here? Because we do care a lot about this. And we know the Atlantic is a very trusted, and I'm going to say even intellectual thought leader, where you can bring together people that are working the land, processors like us, and other folks in the food space that really care and have an honest discussion about food and where we need to be relevant. So we really, really are honored to be here. So thank you for coming. Thank you for interest in this topic, and on behalf of the entire dairy community, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. We've got an excellent panel today, but before we begin, could everyone please silence your cell phones, but keep them handy to tweet using the hashtag #IdeasForum, and we'll be taking questions with the mics, so be ready. And now our panel. Marjorie Meek-Bradley runs the kitchen at Ripple, Roofers Union, and Smoked and Stacked, and you may recognize her from season 13 of Top Chef. Danielle Vogel is the owner of Glen's Fresh Market, a Washington grocery store featuring locally grown food. Maria Rose Belding is the executive director and co-founder of the Means Database, a website that connects donors of extra food with food banks in need. And leading the conversation, please welcome the Atlantic's writer, Olga Khazan. So Olga, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for being here. And I guess we'll start with you, Danielle. Tell us why you opted to sell only local produce.
Sure. Can everyone hear me? So I had absolutely no interest at all, ever, in going into the private sector. I was going to spend my life working in Congress. So I worked for 10 years for Democrats and Republicans and independents. I worked in campaign offices, personal offices, committee offices. And it became very clear to me in about 2010 that Congress was most certainly not going to pass a climate change bill. And I'd spent 2.5 years working with Senators Zimmerman, Graham, and Kerry on the last major Senate climate effort, which was, abysmal failure. And so I wanted to start a company that was implicitly motivated by making climate change progress. So I happen to be a fourth-generation grocer. My father started a grocery chain, his father started a chain, my mom's dad started a chain, but this was like not to be my path until all of the doors closed legislatively. So I founded Glen's Garden Market on Earth Day of 2013, specifically to make incremental climate change progress, or as we say in the store, progress one bite at a time. Every single decision we make for the business is made with the environment in mind, in ways very large and very small. But the single most significant thing that we do for the environment is that everything we sell on our shelves comes from the states of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So the DuPont store is 10,000 square feet. It used to be a Safeway. So we're not talking about a little farm stand. It's a real grocery store with all the categories you'd expect to find. But the difference is that everything you see was made by hand up the street, which means that you can't come in and find the brands that you're used to finding in a grocery store, but you're finding a value that is unlike anything you'd find anywhere else. We specifically seek out and cultivate relationships with vendors that treat their land, their animals, and their ingredients with respect, and the result is some pretty great food. So that's why we source from the states of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It's because of our climate change mission.
And I just have a follow-up question for you on that, because I really admire that mission, and I really want to buy local produce a lot of the time, but I find it hard to find, like I go to my farmer's market, in December, and all it is turnips. So I guess I'm just wondering, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with those challenges?
So we sort of joke that we've decided to play the game of running a grocery store on the level extra hard. Because truly, 2 months from now we're going to have garlic and onions and apples and kale, and that's going to be it. So what we try to encourage we call our customers neighbors. So what we try to encourage our neighbors to do is shop like a chef. So the idea is that you shouldn't walk into a grocery store with a recipe and decide dinner is ruined if you can't find a mango. Instead, you should evaluate what you have available, which, by the way, is implicitly much more delicious and nutrient dense than crap that was genetically modified to bop off across the country in the back of a truck, and get a little creative. Maybe add some grains to the recipe if you don't have enough produce to sustain it. But if you are open-minded about eating locally, it is possible to nourish yourself abundantly even in the leaner growing seasons.
Okay, well, so speaking of restaurants, Marjorie, tell us about your 3 restaurants and the concepts behind them and how you decided on those 3 concepts specifically.
Well, I've been in DC, I guess, for 8 years now, but I'm from California originally, and I grew up, eating very local, very seasonal. My mom was very much of kind of the Alice Waters generation, and so, to me, when I moved into the executive chef position, it was very important to me. I realized after cooking all over the country and, everything from, a bakery to a 3 Michelin star restaurant, I realized what was most important was working with local farms, working with local produce. And so Ripple is very much geared towards that. It's a very seasonal menu. It changes weekly. Everything. We get whole goats, whole pigs. We'll get a quarter of a cow sometimes. And it's just utilizing everything. And to me, that's kind of what inspires me is, okay, I have this whole pig. I can't throw any of it away because, that's the restaurant's profit. And so it makes you have a new appreciation for kind of the ingredients you're working with. So Ripple is definitely very seasonal, very local. Roofers Union is just kind of fun. It's in Adams Morgan. It's very much a bar. We have, a rooftop with 50 seats on it. We have a dining room with 100, and then we have a wine bar downstairs. So it's a really large space. We do house-made sausages. We bake pretzel rolls there every day, and as well as kind of appetizers and entrees. And that was really just geared towards the neighborhood. Adams Morgan is very much, a bar neighborhood and a lot of college kids and stuff like that. But we wanted to bring something that they can enjoy, but the people that live there can as well. And so that's been a lot of fun and challenging. Kind of gearing a restaurant towards the neighborhood can be a little bit difficult. And then Smoked and Stacked, I just opened 3 weeks ago, so don't mind me if I have bags to my chin on my eyes right now. But it is a pastrami shop. We do breakfast sandwiches and pastrami. There's not a lot of that in DC. There's definitely some great places. But there wasn't really kind of a carry-out fast casual place, and I lived in New York for 2 years, and breakfast sandwiches are the only thing I lived on when I lived there. I would eat them on my way to work. I worked 14 hours a day per se, and that was the meal of the day. But I love, it's just kind of fun. It's really simple. We bake bread fresh every morning. Breakfast sandwiches, we brine and cook our pastrami we brine it for a week, and we smoke and cook it every morning fresh as well. So to me, it's very, very focused, which I enjoy because, as you branch out and have multiple concepts and multiple things, it becomes harder to keep, your finger on all of them. And, if you do something very simple and very well, then you can kind of do more, streamline it a little bit. So it's been a new challenge, but it's been a lot of fun, and, it's good.
Can I ask a follow-up question, which is just how do you split your time between 3 restaurants? What does that life look like?
A lot of Ubers. No. I open up at Smoked and Stacked every morning right now. I go in, I get the pastrami going. I have someone who's coming to bake bread every morning, kind of work with her, make sure everything's set up, work breakfast, and then I'll usually head over to Ripple in the afternoon, make sure the menu's set for the day, work with my chefs there, and expedite and plate dinner service there. So it's a lot right now, but once everything kind of gets a little bit more organized, I have great teams at every place. So to me, the only way you can do something like that is if you have a good team at every restaurant and you trust them and they trust you.
So after we're done buying our groceries and eating at our restaurant, we might have some leftovers, which is where your service, Maria Rose, comes in. Can you tell me a little bit about the MEANS database and what it is, how you came up with it, how it works?
Absolutely. So MEANS stands for Matching, Access, and Need for Stability. 14-year-old me had an acronym. It's actually incredibly simple. We are an online, nonprofit communications platform for emergency food providers and their donors. So in English, we work with soup kitchens, homeless shelters, food banks, anybody who feeds people and is a charity. They create free accounts with us and tell us where they are, how to get a hold of them, what they need, and how far they're willing to travel to get it. And then everything else is algorithms. We send them email and or text alerts, whatever they've told us they want, when somebody's got what they need, whether that's a grocery store, a restaurant, another emergency food provider, we're that communication piece. We've moved over 60,000 pounds of food in the last calendar year, so that's pretty exciting. We are working with partners in 46 states, DC and counting, so that's also exciting. And this was all the brainchild of a very awkward 8th grader. So I grew up working in a food pantry. I'm from Iowa, I grew up around farms. A lot of our team are actually former farm kids, and we would throw away food at the food pantry. 90% of emergency food providers receive donations they have to throw away. And that's not because they're not grateful, it's not because they don't care, it's because they're given stuff they can't use. It's super common for people, usually out of the best of intentions, to just leave stuff on the front steps. We woke up one morning to a donation of 4,000 pounds of pizza sauce in rural New Hampshire in individual 1 ounce packets.
And that's a problem because it's hard to store, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This poor woman that runs this food pantry as a volunteer got to church on a Monday morning and there were pallets blocking her door.
Wow. So is this who can donate to this? Who can sign up for this? Like if I have a bunch of peanut butter, is that what happens, or
Depends.
Okay.
So when we talk about food rescue and food recovery, we have to take a look at the total number of resources that are being used. If you're standing in your kitchen and you've got 3 pounds of food waste, you might feel really bad throwing it away, but also we can't take that. And the amount of energy you're going to have to expend with transportation and with safe storage, it's actually going to be a negative on the planet if you try to donate that. So you really have to think about all of these pieces. Anybody who is a restaurant, a caterer, a grocery store, emergency food provider can donate on our platform, and we do work with individuals after we've screened them.
I see. So that way you make sure that no one donates anything that's gone bad or anything like that. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, so turning back to you, Marjorie, I was wondering what, so talking about Top Chef, the burning thing, how did you get to be Top Chef, and what lessons did you learn from that experience?
Top Chef, I worked for Mike Isabella for quite a few years. I've known him. He hired me when I was 19 years old in Philadelphia and was one of my first chefs ever. And he went on Top Chef. He's really kind of made his career off of, his success on the second time around on the show. And so, it always was kind of fun and challenging, and I applied for it when I worked for him, and I made it all the way through and then didn't get picked. And I was like, F this, like, whatever. Not meant to be. I left, started working at Ripple, kind of went down a different path, and I was very happy with that. Things like James Beard Awards and Food and Wine magazine accolades were always more what I was after than, a reality television show. But, the opportunity presented itself last year, and it was just kind of like, it wasn't that I was bored, but I was just like, well, that sounds kind of exciting, and, maybe, why not? And so I kind of re-went through all the application and, got selected this time. And honestly, it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. It was really, really hard, and it's super challenging, and there's things that you never imagined. You would have, just sitting in a room for 7 hours and not allowed to talk, not allowed to do anything while waiting. But in the end, I met amazing chefs. I was put in situations where I got constant feedback on my food from some of the best chefs in the country, and it really allowed me to grow a lot as a chef. And it definitely has opened doors, but even more than that, it's just allowed me a new perspective on, the industry and different people, working with different people. And, the TV side of it is a little weird. In the end, it was definitely worth it, and I really enjoyed it and grew a lot from it. So
Did you steal any tips for any of your restaurants? Any of the other contestants?
No, I mean, I think in this industry, what I love so much about being a chef is it's very collaborative. There is no stealing, there is no, oh, that was my idea. It's food, it's meant to nurture people, it's meant to be fun. And sure, it's a business, and, there's a lot of different sides to it, but to me, it always goes back to the core of it. It's just, feeding people and nurturing people.
And Danielle, you had an interesting experience before you became a grocer, which is working in politics and on Capitol Hill. What was that transition like? What did you have to learn really quickly in order to start selling food?
Oh, geez. Okay, so I had no management experience at all, and I now have 96 employees. I mentioned that I was a 4th generation grocer. I was born with the grocer gene, not with the empathy gene. So the management of the people is by far the hardest part for me, for sure. And then, by the way, it's a retail interface, so that is a thing. That is a reality that's happening to me all day. My family thought that this was the worst idea I'd ever had in my whole life. They did not see any path to success for me. So we had to learn all that. But then the other thing was, I built a grocery store, right? So you're surrounded by food with no idea how to manage a business or your staff. And by the way, nobody's ever heard of an all-local grocery store before. So for the first 10 months of our business, it was crickets and tumbleweeds. I mean, people came in because we sell draft beer for $4, and I could not get them to notice they were sitting in the middle of a grocery store and buy anything. So my dad used to say, in the grocery industry, if you don't sell it, you smell it. So we spent a long time figuring out how to become much more efficient, so we would lose less money on a daily basis. So it was a vertical learning curve. There was absolutely nothing that prepared me for any of the facets of small business that are now my reality. I'm a litigator. I mean, I wouldn't have gone to law school if it was great at math, but that's pretty important to running a small business. And it was just literally every single thing is new. But we're now in our 4th year. So the best part of that is that we're not rookies anymore. So It's not our first time, which is so much fun. It's not to say we're great at it yet, but we're like obsessive about the details and studying the analytics. So at least we kind of have a sense of how it's going to go this time, which is comforting.
And so, and I'm wondering kind of what's the most in-demand thing for food pantries, and you know, what do people want, and what are they getting too much of? Like, are there too many green beans out there? Yeah.
So here's what's really interesting about that. There's not a good answer. We actually got a $15,000 grant this summer to do a study, and we talked to and by we I mean our wonderful interns, made 7,000 phone calls to phone numbers that allegedly belong to food pantries. Fun fact, 35% of those numbers are disconnected or not food pantries, and that does not include the voicemails. But when we were able to actually talk to somebody, we asked them very open-ended, because we wanted a good answer. What's the most popular item with your clients, and then what's the least popular item? 60% overlap between those two columns, talking to emergency food providers across the country. The only thing we heard consistently was that everyone wants to stop getting cranberries. Cranberries. They were like, please no, please stop doing this
Like
sauce.
cranberry sauce?
Cranberry sauce, whole cranberries, like any variety of cranberry, they were just not having it.
Okay.
But other than that, it was very, very different based on where you were at.
Huh. Interesting. So what are in-demand food items for you know, in restaurants and grocery stores? What trends are you seeing as far as what people want to buy these days?
Kale.
Kale.
Kale's always in style.
It's not indigenous.
Is kale still in? Because it was in a couple years ago.
Oh, it's in.
Okay. What about turmeric? I've been hearing that people are into turmeric now.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely cook with a lot of, I cook with a lot of spices and roots like that in general, but fresh turmeric, I mean, restaurants are a little different. I think that like there's like health trends, which are what people are buying at a grocery store, and then there's like indulgent trends, which is what you're eating when you go out. You know, you're going to the grocery store with local produce for your day-to-day, but you're coming to, you know, smoked and stacked for a pastrami sandwich because you want to indulge in it, not because it's necessarily like super healthy. But you know, everything's made fresh from scratch, so it's like, to me, when you're indulging, you want it to be worth it. Like, nobody wants to go to McDonald's and have a hamburger when you're really craving a hamburger. You want to go find a good hamburger. So I think that's kind of, you know, a balance is what I think most people are trying to find, you know, especially now, this year, last year, you know, kind of the 2000s.
Yeah. I'm curious about the grocery side of that, because I've just been reading that people are less interested in processed food these days, and they want kind of more, I guess, organic or whole ingredients. Have you been finding that, or what do you feel like is in demand for you right now?
Without question or reservation, people are interested in where their food comes from and what's in it. They don't love the notion of ingesting a bunch of pig slime. They like hearing the story of the farmer or the crafter that made what they're enjoying. We sell so many salads. It's a quick and convenient, easy, cost-accessible option for people. They would rather spend their time going to the gym or working late than cooking dinner. So we short-circuit that process for them. They're really grateful for it. But we don't really sell processed foods, so I don't have a comparison point for that.
Yeah. Even like pasta, or?
Yeah. I mean, it's like everything in our store has a story, right? So the pasta is made by this guy named Jim in a little tiny shop in Charlottesville. It hitches a ride up on one of our produce trucks. It's kind of a seasonal item because we can only have it when we're getting produce from that one purveyor. So, yeah.
Is that a real story?
Yeah. Wow. Jim, my mom totally said so. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, she made it up.
It's one of the best things we've got.
So, one thing I've been reading about is that people are now spending more money in restaurants than they are on groceries, and that's sort of, I guess, the first time in history that this has happened. And I'm just wondering, anyone can answer this, but why do you think that is, or what's behind that, and what does that mean?
In my experience, it's convenience, 100%.
Yeah.
Ours is like a restaurant, people call it. So it is as much a restaurant as it is a grocery store. And people absolutely want to know what's in their food, nourish themselves properly, but have the convenience of not having to prepare it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a chef since I was 17, or I've been cooking in restaurants since I was 17, and I started off, you know, cooking at home for my family because my mom would make dinner every night, and I feel like that's not common anymore. And it's kind of sad. I mean, I guess good for me, but I think that it is time, you know, especially in cities. I feel like my reality is probably very different than, you know, a smaller town reality, but, you know, everyone is running everywhere all the time, you know, like you said, whether it's trying to get to that 5:30 class at the gym or trying to get home to, you know, help your children with homework after a long day at the office. I mean, it's just, there's so much to do, and everything is so competitive. So to kind of keep up, other things get shortchanged, and cooking at home takes time, and it takes, like, you have to learn it. Like, I feel like people don't really learn how to cook anymore. I'm shocked when I go to some of my friends' house and they're like impressed that I can like cook a chicken, like literally roast, like put it in the oven and take it out. Like, it's not difficult. So, you know, I think that, you know, a future thing is like kind of, you know, that partnership between where does your food come from and now how is it prepared? Because a lot of people, I think, just are growing up not learning to cook.
I'll jump off that. I graduated from public high school in 2014, and home ec is offered. It's a thing. There are food prep classes, but if you, at least in my high school, if you were a student like me and you were expected to take everything honors and everything AP and everything challenging, and you were going to apply to top colleges, you didn't have room in your schedule. You were told that you could not take that because it would look like you weren't trying academically. And there's literally no nutrition education. Like, I remember standing behind girls in line, in like our a la carte line, and hear them go, "Oh my god, I'm so fat," and then they would get like French fries and a double chocolate muffin, and I'd be like, one, you're not. Please be realistic. But also number two, what are you doing? Like, there isn't good nutrition education in public high schools and like food education.
Yeah.
Like, it's not. I don't think it's necessarily, our generation often kind of gets blamed for things, and I think we're kind of saying, they just don't want to learn to appreciate food. We have some other stuff to do, and we haven't had the option to learn it at home quite as much as some of our other generations past.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work with No Kid Hungry. It's a really great organization. I just went down to New Orleans with them into the schools. And, you know, they have different partnerships, and, you know, I did some work on the Hill with, you know, the childhood nutrition, reauthorization, that's the word I couldn't remember. Anyway, and, you know, these, like, young children are so excited, like, it's amazing. I'm in this school, and they have a garden, and they're making granola and frozen yogurt, and they can't wait to tell me about it, and all this stuff, and it's awesome. And, you know, there's this disconnect between, I feel like, a 10-year-old and a 20-year-old, and something happens in that 10 years because children love food. I mean, they like get really excited about it, even like picky eater children, like especially if they're growing it in their gardens. I think that's the biggest thing that like needs to be focused on is the gap isn't in like, you know, the like really formative years, it's in like the 10 to 20 range, I think, you know, and whether it's making it okay to take home ec or, you know, finding after school programs that involve cooking, it's definitely like, I mean, right now it's like kind of a thing, but it's going to be a real problem, I think, you know, the longer things like this go on. But I don't know.
Yeah. And at the same time, I mean, DC has so many great restaurants these days that sometimes it feels like you should take advantage of them. And I guess I'm wondering whether you guys have any theories as to why that's all happened in these past few years. I mean, I've been here since 2004, and I really haven't heard about DC being talked about as a big restaurant city until just recently.
I think a really big thing about kind of this food boom, like restaurant boom, chef boom, is, you know, I was talking to Tim Carmen, who's a local writer here for the Washington Post, and he writes for the food section. He does reviews, he does like kind of research pieces, different things, and he equates it to like chefs are kind of like, you know, the new rock star or whatever. It's like, which I think is super weird, but you know, you go out to dinner at Bad Saint, let's say, you know, it's awesome, they only have 24 seats, the food's amazing, it's super unique. What do you do when you get to work next day? You tell everyone about Bad Saint, and it's a conversation piece, and it's interesting, and people are excited about it, and it's really trendy. It's like something to talk about, and a way to feel cool, or, oh, I met so-and-so, and I couldn't believe it, and I had pig brains at Ripple the other night because, like, you know, the chef made it for me. And, like, that, like, people get really excited. And that's exciting to me because it gives me an opportunity to not, like, educate people, but give them something they've never had before, or do a pig ear salad because, you know, pig ears are being wasted, or whatever it might be. If you can make it taste good, people are willing to try it now, and that's awesome. But I think it's, like, super trendy. Like, not trendy, like, bad trendy, just, like, it's something to talk about. It's exciting to people.
And I think it's sort of parallel to that. I mean, we've been seeing this huge boom in reality food TV and just food TV in general. And I'm just curious whether you guys know, like, why that's so captivating, or like why do people love watching other people cook so much? I don't know. I certainly do.
I don't know why. I mean, I've done it, but I don't know why people get so into it.
Yeah, I got nothing. Yeah. Anyways, and I was also wondering for restaurants in particular, how is, and possibly this happens in grocery stores now too, but how has Instagram affected that whole industry? Like the fact that everything has to be beautiful because it might show up in someone's feed and it has to look like pretty with the filter on. How has that affected you?
I mean, I definitely use Instagram a lot as, you know, a marketing tool, honestly. But yeah, I mean, you do have to think about the aesthetics. Like, we painted a mural on one of our walls at Smoked and Stacked, and I was like, oh, I'm really glad we did that, because now there's picture, everyone, like, takes a picture in front of it, and, you know, it's definitely a way to reach people. I love Instagram, so it's, like, easy for me to use. Like, I'm not really much on Twitter or Facebook, but it's fun. It's pictures. It's that instant, like, you don't even have to, like, think too hard. It's like a picture book, but you have to be aware, or conscious of it, for sure, because if you see stuff that looks bad, you're like, oh God, like, I don't want to go there.
For us, it's like, it is great free advertising material, and it's really effective because everybody's looking at it, but it's also like super dangerous territory, right? Because a sandwich goes out that looks horrible, and for sure it's hitting the internet. Or, you know, like, one of my guys got tired of explaining the difference between the sizes of the soup bowl, so he thought he'd just write it on the soup bowl. So it said 12 ounce, BOWEL. Or like one of my guys was like labeling the chickens, like the herb chickens and the spice chickens, and it said ERB chicken. And I'm like, dude, like, for sure that's going to be on our Facebook page. So it works for great. It's like very low cost advertising, but it also can certainly be a source of like great embarrassment for small businesses.
Yeah. And when people come in and they're like, what do you mean you don't have pineapples? Like, that's an essential part of the thing I'm making tonight because of my meal planning app that I also pay for. And like, well, how do you explain all that to them?
Every day. So this is such a constant conversation in our stores that the staff t-shirts, on the back of them, they have a picture of a banana with a circle and a line through it. It is what it is. I mean, at Whole Foods, like, the #1 selling item is bottled water, and the #2 selling item is bananas. Yeah. So again, this is like playing the game of grocery store extra hard. But we try to use it as an opportunity to start a conversation, right? Because in a normal grocery store, a Safeway, if you walk in and you ask for a thing they don't have, you're going to hear, we don't have it. That's not my department. But in our stores, we get to explain the names of the partners that we work with, where the produce is coming, what you can expect to see next week. Have you ever tried a ground cherry? Try this kiwi berry, it's unbelievable. And it's a real opportunity for a conversation. So we talk a lot about turning a no into an education opportunity. And it makes for a much more pleasant experience, frankly. I mean, the person leaves like getting to taste all this great indigenous produce with a couple of new menu ideas. And I'll tell you that, like, every once in a while, if somebody identifies that they're having like a dinner emergency and they absolutely need this one ingredient, I will 100% go down to the kitchen and steal it from the chefs and give it to them on the house. And that's an even greater opportunity to feel like you're really part of something and in a community.
And you're saying that's the local fruits and vegetables are healthier than ones that are trucked in from California or wherever they have enough sunshine.
I mean, that's true for a number of different reasons. So #1, we obviously don't work with farmers that disrespect their land. So we're not bringing in any produce that is cloaked in pesticides. That's not a thing we do. But beyond that, a lot of the genetic modified foods that you're eating and seeing in grocery stores are engineered to look away and to be easily transportable. Right? So they're like, the apples are more square, so they stack better in a crate. So when they're bopping across the country in the back of an 18-wheeler, they end up safely looking perfect. But then you bite into it and it really sucks, right? And then beyond that, because they're prepared for a long transit, they're being harvested before they're ripe. So they're not developing their peak nutrient diversity in the field. They're certainly not developing the sugars that would make them sweet and wonderful. So if you're looking out for specifically responsibly raised, sustainably sourced local produce, what you're finding are produce items that are treated properly, that are allowed to ripen and sort of come into their own splendor. And then they're harvested, maybe 2 days before you find them on the shelf, which means they haven't had any of that nutrient depletion time. So it's true, you're only going to find asparagus 2 weeks a year, but man, is it good asparagus. So it's a trade-off. But the result is that if you're willing to be a little bit creative, the produce truly is better for you and better for the environment.
And I mean, the other issue, of course, is that Americans waste a lot of food, and that's sort of where your app comes in. But also, I mean, just day to day, I know that whenever we go to the farmer's market, sometimes, oh, that didn't get eaten, it's got to go. How do we reduce that? First of all, why does that happen, and then how do we reduce that?
Do you want to? Sure. Sure. So we have, and I'm sure you guys can echo this, a really weird attitude toward food in the United States. We have many weird attitudes about food, but one of the biggest ones is that we expect super full, super bountiful grocery stores, and we're horrified at the idea that the grocery store might not have what we're looking for right that moment in the size and color we want it. We have this weird thing about not wanting to take the last apple or the last something. So grocery stores and restaurants frequently really, really overstock, which inevitably leads to a lot of waste. There are 49 million Americans who rely on the food pantry every year, and more than half of them rely on it for 6 months or more out of the year. Not only is hunger a problem, it is no longer a problem that is a crisis for a week before payday. It is a fact of life and a constant in the lives of at least 25 million of our neighbors. But we produce the food just fine. So food waste is just an affront to the existence of hunger in the United States. Hunger's a stupid problem. We're not in a famine. We can produce the food, we can ship it, we can process it, but at some point we decide that 40% of it just isn't worth it, and then we throw it away. We should have solved this a long time ago.
But how do we solve it? I mean, do we all sign up for a service like yours? Should we donate more to food banks? Like, I feel like sometimes I just don't know what to do. What's the best way? Yeah.
So I'll answer it in a little bit of a different way. So
Yeah.
obviously what she's describing doesn't plague us because our mission is climate change progress. Food waste is atrociously bad for climate change. First of all, it was incredibly intensive on the way in. Not just because of all the resources that are consumed in growing food, but then harvesting food and then transporting it, and to say nothing of the refrigeration once it gets to me. And then it lands in a landfill where it decomposes and produces methane, which is like 12 times more carbon intensive than CO2. So that's like a no bueno scenario from our mission perspective. So we operate under a very strict no waste mandate. So you're right. In places like everywhere else, I need not name names, they have these gorgeous, abundant pyramids of bountiful deliciousness that are irresistible. It's irresistible to walk through the Whole Foods produce department. I can't do it. I hate it when people take pictures of me grabbing a pineapple, but it smells so good and it looks so great. But we don't do that. So instead, we operate under this no waste mandate, which means that our chefs have to use absolutely everything. So if an apple drops on the floor, it doesn't look as best. Kale is becoming a little bit floppy. A tomato is just a little bit past its prime. It's absolutely going to become a super salad the next day. And the only things that we can't use are the things that are like inedible, like an onion skin, for instance. We would compost. But absolutely every food product that's edible, we repurpose into like a grocery food chain item, like a soup or a salad or a sandwich or something like that. Now the other side of it is that we seek out and develop relationships with partners that share our values. So that's kind of the way that the tentacles of our movement expand beyond the walls of our stores. So in the 3.5 years that we've been open, we've launched 64 local food businesses, which means that we've given 64 food entrepreneurs their very first chance to sell on our shelves. Of those 64, 32 are owned by women, 40 are made within the District of Columbia. So that's meaningful. But two in particular are Misfit Juicery and Fruit Cycle. Has anybody heard of either of those two companies? Yeah, because they're awesome. So Misfit was started by two kids in Georgetown out of their dorm room. They only use ugly produce, Misfit produce. It's called gleaned produce. So this is produce that would otherwise go to waste in the field or be cast aside as food waste, and they juice it. So they're able to redirect hundreds of thousands of pounds of what would otherwise be food waste into a delicious, edible product every year. They now have regional distribution. They're being sold in Italy. They've made like a big mark for themselves in about a year's time. And then Fruit Cycle is a company that was started by a woman named Elizabeth Bennett who wanted to give fruit and women second chances. So she does the same thing, where she goes around to regional farmers, she grabs the produce that would otherwise have been discarded, and she only employs formerly incarcerated women. So she's making these great, she makes trail mix, she makes apple chips, she makes this unbelievable tart cherry sauce, and all of it is with food that would have otherwise gone to waste. So there are ways that you can support the minimization of food waste, both in terms of the products that you choose to buy, the quantities that you buy in, and then what you do with it afterward. So maybe you went to the farmer's market and your kale looks like crap.
Yeah.
Puree it, make pesto. You know, it doesn't need to look the way you got it for you to enjoy eating it.
Okay. Well, on that note, we're going to take some questions from the audience.
I'd like to ask a question of the ladies.
Good, Mike.
I'd like to ask a question of the ladies. I think one of the major concerns about food and what we're eating is what are the young people eating, the high school kids in particular. How can we address the need to re-educate what they're eating? Because we have, as you know, huge amounts of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and all the young, huge weight loss, weight gain, obesity. Do we have programs that you know about that are helping with what you produce and what you're doing in restaurants? Are we educating them at that level, or are we educating them in their schools? What are we doing to help make our society well again?
So, can I start on that one? Okay, great. So there is something called the obesity paradox. Hungry people in the United States they don't look anymore like they're starving. They don't look real thin. One of the biggest markers of food insecurity in the United States is obesity, because cheap food is almost exclusively bad for you. Share Our Strength, which you mentioned earlier, does absolutely awesome childhood nutrition education programs. There are quite a few food banks and partners that we work with that do the same thing. Facing the realities of, I probably can't afford organic food, or there's no place near me where I can purchase that, or all I have in my neighborhood corner stores, how do we address that? So really trying to address the food environment and the nutritional environment around where people are. I've got a really different perspective on this because my high school had the highest rate of eating disorders in the state. So it was very normal to see my friends just not eat. That was just so normalized in our culture. And I think we've got to switch how we talk about nutrition, because so much of it is shame-based. So much of it is based on making you feel bad if you don't look a certain way, and the emphasis is not put on feeling good about yourself and physically feeling good. The emphasis is put on shame and feeling bad. And I think we've got to switch to feeling good and being positive and recognizing the health benefits of eating well and making it feasible for people at all income levels.
Yeah. Next question.
So, sorry. Hi, I'm a registered dietitian with National Dairy Council and the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, and I'm loving this conversation and the question about nutrition education. So building on that and what you just said, how do you work with trained health professionals to help educate the public about nutrition? And if they will only eat fruits and vegetables of a certain type, how do you help expand their knowledge? Because so many people are not eating fruits and vegetables of any type. So how do we not shame them for whatever choices that they're making?
I mean, a big thing for me, you know, I keep myself very busy and I have a lot of projects I'm working on, but I always make time to go to the schools, and whether it's judging a cooking competition for like young students or going to Academy, which is a culinary school, and doing a butchering demo. It's just, you know, chefs, especially in DC, I think there's so many great programs. And it's, you know, just trying to elevate those beyond just me spending a day with 30 kids. It's like, how can that reach, you know, 3,000 kids or, you know, 30,000, whatever, is, you know, figuring out ways to partner with bigger groups of kind of like telecommunication and different things like that to be able to get a broader reach to more schools, because there's a lot of really amazing programs, but it's not enough, and it's not in the areas that really, really need it. So I think, you know, the biggest thing that really needs to be done is just connecting, you know, not just food people with students, but maybe technology people and ways to kind of get to a broader audience of children, and, you know, educators as well. I mean, the teachers are really the key, because there is a teacher for every 30 kids. And, you know, if I can educate that teacher on nutrition, they can then educate those kids and every kid every year that comes through their classroom.
And just, sorry, but just to build on that too, like protein comes from dairy.
Right.
So if you don't know how to cook, you pour a glass of milk, you're gonna get protein.
Right.
So if the teacher doesn't know that, how do we get that information to them? And eating seasonally and like a bag of beans is super cheap. So I think there's so many of these little nuances that people are told one thing, but there's all these other choices, but they have no idea. And you look at that, so how do you get that information out there? Thank you.
Do you know the name Dan Giusti? Does anybody know that name? He was the executive chef of Noma, which was the #1 restaurant in the whole wide world in Copenhagen. And he decided that doing that was really cool, but it wasn't moving the needle in terms of exactly what you're describing. So he moved home from Copenhagen a few months ago and started a nonprofit called Breakout. And the whole idea is that he's putting like ultra master mega chefs into school cafeterias. And the idea is there is only so far you can go in teaching, but if you just get the food in their mouths, you're making progress. So it's probably worth looking into. It's a really cool project, and it comes at the question you're asking from a different perspective, which is not curriculum based, but if you teach people by nourishing them and cultivating their enjoyment of something that's really great for them, that in itself is a very educational experience.
Sir, back there, sorry. You guys didn't know.
We've already talked about the issue of people wanting to know what's in their food. There's a great hunger, so to speak, for transparency these days. But at the same time, our own government seems to be working against us in precluding transparency. And I give you this DARK Act that passed in July, despite 90% of the population wanting to know about GMOs, wanting them labeled clearly. The industry spent $59 million essentially bribing these senators to vote against the interests of the people. So when the government is working with industry in a kind of corporate crony fashion, how can people circumvent that? We only have like 1% of the land that's devoted to growing organic food. I mean, there's a huge disconnect here. How do we arrest that?
Smart choices. I left because they're them, right? So that wasn't working for me. And so I created a like totally insurrectionist model of a grocery store to make sure that people had another option. And the way you support education is by providing an alternative. So you don't have to go to Walmart and buy, well, they're supportive of organics, that's great. You don't have to go to Safeway and buy like the worst tomato you've ever had. You can, in fact, go to your farmer's market or support other small businesses. There are lots of us that are trying to do what we're doing. And like, the villain is the villain, and there's only so much we can do to change Congress. But you can change the outcome for yourself, your community, your families, by making choices that are perhaps counterintuitive. The options are out there.
Also, just real quick, certified organic food in some ways is actually worse than what you're buying at the farmer's market or if you're going to local grocers. Certified organic costs the farmers way too much money to be able to always get certified. It's often traveling from Chile, traveling from South America. And I mean, I grew up in Northern California. I worked at the second certified organic restaurant in the country. And what I learned from that was certified organic is not like the answer. It's buying local, it's buying from people you know, and that's the most important thing. I think if people can understand that, that really will help, you know, some of the other things be less relevant, like needing the GMO labels. Like, if you can buy local, which is not always more, I mean, sometimes it's more expensive, but if you're going to farmers market, they have great programs and, you know, educational tools to be able to shop there and afford it. And it's just, certified organic is not always necessarily the best way either.
Next question, let's go up here.
Yeah, I am proud to say that I am what is called a foodie. I love my food, and I prefer to be healthful because I feel better, quite frankly. It's not only looking better, I actually feel better if I eat properly and well. Now, getting close to what's going on here, I do not like sandwiches and wraps. So what's the thing with the wraps then? Are they of any nutritional value? And I prefer good bread, so there.
Anyone have a comment? Next question, right there.
It's kind of a comment, kind of a question. I really appreciate what you said about sort of,
You know, choosing your local produce, and we're having a very elite DC conversation amongst people who have those kinds of choices, and so I really appreciate that you're here. I just wondered where you, on the topic of GMOs, I mean, I'd be interested to hear kind of where folks stand on that, because I think there is a really nuanced discussion when you look at Nobel Peace Prize winners saying, yes, we need to create, you know, genetically modified meat to feed the world, but there's in fact not enough elsewhere. So how do you square a position here in the United States where we actually do have the ability to kind of feed ourselves versus the kind of research and development that needs to go into what needs to feed the rest of the world who doesn't have that kind of option? So I just like to hear what you guys say on kind of this is a broader question.
Thank you for asking that. Thank you so much. So I have an opinion on GMOs. I come from the world of hunger and food insecurity. My opinion probably doesn't match the opinion of people in this room, and that's okay. Our organization, Means, has no official stance. We move foods that are GMO-free, we move foods with GMO. Goal is to feed people. I think what's often missing in conversations about GMOs is exactly what you're talking about. It cannot be presented as moral superiority. It cannot be, well, I choose to feed my family GMO-free because I love them. Like that's great, and that's your choice, and hope it works out well for you, but access is not equal. If you are struggling to feed your family, you don't care. So I think the conversation around GMOs can be so incredibly elitist. It can get really elitist really fast, and it's totally fine if you can afford it, and there's healthy produce, and there's a great farmer's market in your community that does double bucks with SNAP. But it's so important to recognize that not everybody has access to those things, and that the choices that you make are yours, but should not dictate your judgment of other people.
Who's a question now about GMOs? In the blue shirt.
Thank you so much for the work that all of you do. When I go to Glen's a lot, I've been to Red Bull, anyway, but I have a question for you. Do you, because everybody, even people who are suffering from hunger and food deprivation, they have a right to eat well too. Do you have a policy about what you won't deliver to a food pantry?
Yes. So we do not move, sorry, I said that. So we do not move soda. We do not move full sugar beverages. There is literally no nutritional value. We will take Powerade because it's very helpful for diabetics whose blood sugars are low. We will take juice. We do not take added sugar carbonated beverages, and I believe this is in effect now. We also don't take cake. Sheet cakes are the bane of the existence of food banks. They get so many of them. So that's where we stand on that. people are welcome to have cakes and cookies. We don't want to assume that we know what's best for other people. That's their call. But I cannot, in good conscience, move soda around. I'm a public health major. I can't do it.
And you're talking about sheet cakes, like prepared
sheet cakes.
It's very true. They go bad. I grew up in a soup kitchen. My parents ran a soup kitchen. That's how I started cooking, and
So
I
cool.
ate sheet cake every day. And I think they made the same decision. They're like, we're not taking cakes anymore. No more desserts for.
Yeah.
But yeah,
They're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Oh,
The small parts.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
yeah, up here in the front.
They're like nutritional locusts. So, yes. I grew up in a food insecure house. I was a total city kid. We used our local food pantry. Today, I am a dairy farmer. I have the farm that many of your customers would love. It's a small family farm. I farm with my husband and his parents. We have 100 cows and 300 acres of crops. People picture our farm when they picture dairy. We also grow GMOs. We also grow what's right for our land. We do use some pesticides, the things that we need to produce a crop to feed our cows. I wonder each of your takes, I think I know your take, on how, we talked about villains before. How has the food movement villainized farms like ours, the average farm, in your opinion?
I mean, it's definitely a tough conversation because it's very easy to sit up here and be like, yes, I buy all local, all seasonal, blah, blah, blah. And the reality is that it's not sustainable for everyone. I have been, I can make anything taste good, I like to think, so I can buy, whatever, but it's like, I won't buy, pork from Smithfield. I think it's disgusting. I've never been to Smithfield. I don't really know that for a fact, but in my mind, I will never buy pork from there. So I don't know how I came to that assumption, if I watched a video, if I read a book, but to me, there is lines, and I don't know where they started, whether, Michael Moore movies or whatever it was, but, because I understand what you're saying, and I don't think that there's people, though, that did take it too far, that are doing things wrong, that are mistreating animals, that are making really big mistakes, and unfortunately, people that are somewhere in the middle get grouped with them, and I don't know what the answer to that is, really.
Thank you so much. I'm really sorry I'm getting the stop sign. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Marjorie, Danielle, and Maria Rose for Well, first of all, thank you, Olga, and to all our panelists. We'll be back on the main stage at the Harmon Center at 2 p.m. with CIA Director John Brennan in conversation with the Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg, and a screening tonight of Loving. So if you could make your way back to the forum, we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.